Hello, my name is Dr. Kurt Sander, and this is Music Theory Simplified. This is the second in a three-part lesson on seventh chords. The last time we met, we talked about the 5 different qualities of seventh chords, why you would use a seventh chord, and how you could identify the quality based on their intervallic construction of major and minor thirds. Today, we are going to look at inversions of seventh chords. Now, if you recall, an inverted chord is simply a chord where the lowest pitch is not the root. And we have different labels for seventh chord inversions, just as we did with triads. When we talked about triads in inversion, we saw that there are only 2 possible inversions. First inversion, which we call a 6 chord, and second inversion, which we call a 6/4 chord. Now, because there are 4 pitches in a seventh chord, you obviously have the root position capabilities. But in addition to that, you have 3 possible inversions, first, second, and third inversion. So let's take a look at these and see how we would identify them and label them.
So here we have a seventh chord, and again, we're going to use colors for the time being to associate pitch with chord member, where it is in the chord. Just like before, roots are in red, thirds are in green, fifths are in blue, and now sevenths, a new color, are in pink. And this is just a way to keep track of what's what in the chord. Just as with triads, the numerical symbols we use to label the chords come from the intervallic makeup of the chord. For example, a seventh chord in root position creates the intervals of a seventh, a fifth, and a third. But to keep things really simple, when labeling root position seventh chords, we need only use the number 7 alone. When talking about seventh chords in first inversion, it's important to remember that the third of the chord will always be the lowest pitch. And when this third is the lowest pitch, it creates these intervals, the 6th, the 5th, and the 3rd, above that note. But to keep things as simple as possible, first inversion seventh chords are labeled only with the numbers 6, 5. A second inversion seventh chord will always have the 5th as the lowest voice, creating the intervals of a 6th, a 4th, and a 3rd above that note. But again, to keep things simple, we abbreviate. We call second inversion seventh chords 4/3 chords. Seventh chords have 4 pitches, and it's that 4th pitch that gives us the possibility of a third inversion. Third inversion chords are where the 7th of the chord is in the lowest voice. And it gives us the intervals of a 6th, a 4th, and a 2nd. And just like before, we abbreviate to keep things simple. All third inversion seventh chords are called 4/2 chords. Now I know what you're probably thinking. How is it possible to memorize all of these numbers, let alone associate them with the inversions? Well, there's an easy solution to that. If you can count backwards from 7, you can memorize the numerical abbreviations for seventh chords. Here's what I mean. Let's start with the root position and count backwards. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 2. Okay, so music's not a perfect science, but it's close enough to help you remember.
Initially, I find that students have a somewhat difficult time memorizing these number combinations for seventh chord inversions. So if you just remember to count backwards from 7, with the one exception of that extra 4, this might help you to remember. So now let's try identifying seventh chords in inversion in a chorale type setting. Now to get the right answer, you need to get 3 pieces of information from the chord. The first, you need to be able to identify the root of the seventh chord. Secondly, you need to be able to identify what part of the chord is the lowest pitch. And thirdly, you need to be able to identify the quality. Those 3 pieces of information will allow you to correctly identify the chord. So let's get started.
Okay, here we have a seventh chord, and we know it's a seventh chord and not a triad because there are 4 distinct pitches. There are no double notes here at all. So just like before, we are going to see if we can stack thirds on top of that lowest pitch to determine the root. So we're going to move that C up here and look for an E, which is a third above, and there it is in the alto right there. We're going to move that up. A third above that is a G, and we're going to look for a G, and there it is in the tenor. We're going to slide that up here, and then we're going to look for a third above that, which is a B. And you can see that our remaining note is not a B, it's an A. And so that we're going to slide over below, and then we see that this is an A seventh chord. We don't know quality yet, but we know that A is the root. So we're going to go ahead and put it back in its original form and see what chord member is the lowest pitch. And we can see that it's the third of the chord. So we're going to call this then a 6/5 chord built on A. When the third is the lowest note, we call it a 6/5. And the quality, you can see, is stacked on a minor triad, and we know the only minor triad seventh chord is a minor seventh. So the official name for this is an A minor 6/5.
So it's very important to assemble those three pieces of information: the root, the lowest pitch, and what chord member that is, and then the quality. Those three things will get you the right answer. Let's try another one.
So here we have another seventh chord. We can tell it's a seventh chord because there are 4 distinct pitches, no doubled pitches. And we know that can't be a triad then. We'll do the same process. We'll start with the lowest note and see if we can stack notes a third above. So we're going to move that A up there and look for a C. And of those 3 remaining pitches, no matter how hard you look, you're not going to find a C. This is good news because what that means is we can go ahead and move all of those pitches below. And you can see they line up neatly there in stacked thirds, and we can see that the B is the root of that. So we're looking at some sort of B seventh chord. If we keep the colors but put them back in their original configuration, you can see that the lowest note, that pink note, is the 7th of the chord that we just stacked. Now try to remember, what is the numerical symbol for a third inversion chord? Well, let's count backwards from 7. When the root is the lowest note, it's a 7 chord. When the third is the lowest note, it's a 6/5. When the 5th is the lowest note, it's a 4/3. And in this case, because that 7th is the lowest note, we're going to call this a 4/2 chord. And because the root is B, as we determined, this is a B4/2. Now the only thing left is to figure out the quality. If we put it back in its most stacked compressed form, we can see that from B to D to F is a diminished triad with a major third on top. And if you recall, this is the configuration of our half-diminished 7th chord. So our final answer then is that this is a B half-diminished 4/2 chord. And by referring to it in this way, we understand that it is an inverted chord built on B. If this went too fast, simply rewind and watch again.
So I hope this visual guide has been a really good way to simplify the step-by-step process to get the right answer in terms of inverted 7th chords. In our next lesson, we're going to put these 7th chords in a tonal context. We're going to assign Roman numerals to them, look a little bit at what are the more common types of 7th chords in tonal music, and talk a little bit about how they're used in harmonic grammar. But for now, that's all the time we have today. As always, this is Dr. Sander reminding you to keep it simple.